chairperson of the New York State Assembly's Committee on Cities. We're happy to be here for this infrastructure hearing. I want to really thank the Monroe County for allowing us to use this wonderful building and this wonderful room in this wonderful building, and the Monroe County staff that has set this all up. We really appreciate your hospitality, and it's good New York hospitality. And I would be remiss if I didn't thank our assembly staff, Ashley Drake and Meg Antz, who were up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get here. And I'm also happy to be here with my colleague in the State Assembly, and we're back in his old stomping grounds when he was a county legislator, Assemblyman Harry Bronson. It's just good to be here. We thank the county, and we apologize for to the legislature that we have or will be commandeering that clock, and we're bringing it back to Albany because that should be in the assembly chamber. That's just magnificent. Last year, when I became the chairperson of the Cities Committee, I began to hear and pay attention to some of the issues in and around Albany, and some of the problems they're having with their infrastructure, and in particular with sewer breaks and emergency repairs and lack of funds. And I realized we might have a bit of a problem throughout the state, and I vowed that this budget season we would begin to listen to some of the municipalities around the state to find out from themselves and in their own words what their priorities are, what their needs are, what they think the state can do to help them, and just as importantly, and how we possibly can take a look at about raising this money, to attend to this infrastructure needs. So, without further ado, we'll begin after my colleague Harry Bronson says a few words, which I'm sure he wants to. Harry?
Sure. Thank you, Assemblymember Benedetto, and thank you for coming and joining us in Monroe County in the city of Rochester, my hometown, and a place that I love dearly. And, as the chairman mentioned, we have been starting to focus more and more on cities, and for my purpose of being a member of the Upstate Caucus, on upstate cities. And we've made some policy decisions here at the state that have tremendous impact on the various cities and other localities. One of them being the real property tax cap, and certainly we're at a point where the rubber hits the road, if you will, on the potential adverse impact of that to localities. And then along with that is we've not been really paying a lot of attention to our maintenance of our infrastructure, whether it be transportation infrastructure or whether water and sewer, things of that nature. And I know you all are working diligently to try to maintain stable budgets, maintain stable taxes, and but you have pressures on the expense side of things that you're asked to do, things that cities are charged to do for their citizens. So I'm anxious to hear from each of you regarding the impact on your particular locality, so that, as the chair said, so that we can look at statewide policies and see if we can be helpful. So thank you for being here, and again, thank you, Chairman, for coming to the great city of Rochester and Monroe County.
Thank you, Harry. Before we call the first witness, just some housekeeping stuff here. Please try to limit your comments to no more than 10 minutes. might be difficult, we understand, but please do. And if you feel like summarizing your testimony rather than reading from a prepared text, certainly do. But if you want to read your text, that's okay too. Okay? Your written testimony will be included as part of the public record. Please also state your name and your title, just for the record, and that we have it so we know and can identify you clearly when you're speaking. Anyone who does not get the chance to testify, who chooses not to testify, but would like to submit a written testimony, we will take that and we will include it on the record. Okay, so without any other announcements, let's go right to our first testimony here today. And we have the Honorable Michael Quill, Mayor of the great city of Auburn. Mr. Mayor Quill. Oh, thank you.
Do I go right here? Or?
Yeah,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I should have pointed that out.
That's quite all right. Good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to present today's regarding the City of Auburn's infrastructure concern. As you stated, my name is Michael Quill, Q-U-I-L-L, the mayor of the City of Auburn. Beautiful community about an hour east of here in the heart of the Finger Lakes. So we welcome all of you to come and visit us on your way home or on your way to Albany. As you well know, New York's physical infrastructure is critical to our economy and affects the daily lives of our residents, from facilitating the movement of travelers and goods and services to provide reliable, safe drinking water. However, as recently illustrated by the 2015 report card for the New York's infrastructure by the American Society of Civil Engineers, New York State Council, the state as a whole received an unacceptable grade of a C-. Furthermore, the state's bridges, roads, and wastewater infrastructure facilities received a grade of D or D-. Much of this has to do with infrastructure, facilities operating beyond their useful life expectancy, and a lack of capital infrastructure investment funds. How can the City of Auburn and the State of New York compete for business and industrial development when New York State very clearly sends a message that it does not prioritize investment in infrastructure? Your attention to this matter today is greatly appreciated. In the upcoming state budget, the legislature has the opportunity to set the state on a path towards significant improvement of our infrastructure needs. The City of Auburn is located within the Central New York Regional Economic Development Council and is the seat of local government for Cuyahoga County. Similar to all cities across New York State, the City of Auburn faces a host of serious infrastructure challenges. The economic well-being of the city of Auburn is dependent on its physical infrastructure and how it affects the daily lives of our 27,000-plus residents. In total, the City of Auburn has 329 streets with 104 centerline miles, 21 bridges and culverts, 1 high hazard and 2 moderate hazard dams, a community water filtration facility and wastewater treatment facility, 109 miles of water distribution mains, 101 miles of sanitary sewer collection lines. In addition, the city provides professional police and fire protection and judicial services to the city and county residents, and these services are currently housed in aged buildings that need immediate replacement. Funding for the City of Auburn's infrastructure comes from a variety of federal, state, local, and private sources. As time goes on, the gap continues to widen as the cost to maintain and improve infrastructure increase at exponential rates, while the city's ability to spend money on capital improvements diminishes with each budget year. The City of Auburn's upcoming critical structure needs the following. It has never been more critical for New York State to construct and rebuild infrastructure to be resilient and sustainable. I offer the following recommendation to the committee for you to implement in the 2016 state budget. The City of Auburn takes seriously the concept of the state property tax cap and recommends that a true 2% cap be used. The cap that is tied to the rate of inflation, which this year is 0.12%, is unreasonable and will only allow the City of Auburn to raise an additional $15,000 through property taxes. Our city's long-term financial plan forecasts 2.5% annual growth in expenditures. We urge the state legislature to make the property tax cap a 2% cap, not one that can fall with inflation. Increase unrestricted aid, formerly state revenue sharing. In 2011, the City of Auburn Aid and Incentive to Municipality, AIM funding, was cut and has been held flat ever since. This is the most direct way the state can assist localities with addressing local infrastructure needs. AIM funding should be restored to pre-2011 levels. This year, local governments receive an additional $50 million for extreme winter recovery to help municipalities pay for the damage to local roads brought on by snow, ice, and cold temperatures last winter. While our current winter has been mild, we are still recovering from the extreme winters of 2014 and 15. We encourage the restoration of extreme weather recovery funds, or take the $50 million and increase the Consolidated Local Street and Highway Improvement Program, the CHIPS program. We support the executive's budget proposal for $21 billion DOT 5-year capital plan to upgrade critical roads, bridges, and other vital transportation infrastructure throughout the state, especially upstate. We urge support of the Bridge New York, Pave New York, and the Extreme Weather Infrastructure Hardening Program. We further encourage that these funds be distributed proportionately throughout the state so that each locality will receive their necessary share. We support the executive's budget proposal for $100 million downtown revitalization program. However, Red Sea districts should be able to allocate the funds to multiple city downtown projects, not just those in one city downtown. We support the executive budget proposal for the expand tourism investment proposal. The City of Auburn is the future home of the Harriet Tubman National Historic Park. The agreement with the National Park Service is expected to become official by spring of this year, and the establishment of the Tubman Park will be one more highlight of New York's many tourism offerings. We support the executive's budget proposal for the Protect Critical Infrastructure program. This is critical to enhancing public safety for localities. The final recommendation we offer today is that New York needs to reform and streamline the approval process for infrastructure projects and consider adopting public-private partnerships, also known as P3 legislation, so that P3 is a standard for all cities in New York State. The state has opened the door with the Tappan Zee Bridge Replacement Project and the Goethals Bridge Replacement Project that utilize P3 to design, build, finance, and maintain the infrastructure project. New York State is behind 20 other states of the Union that have already adopted P3 legislation as cities become more likely to bump up against the constitutional debt limit. It makes a great deal of sense to transfer the risk and financial responsibilities to the private sector. We urge you to consider this public-private partnership model for addressing aging infrastructure in our cities. Thank you again for the opportunity to make this statement today regarding concerns on city infrastructure. Mr. Chairperson, this concludes my prepared statement, and I'd be glad to respond to any question that you or the members of the committee may have.
Mayor Quill, thank you very much. Is it safe for me to conclude from your testimony that many of the initiatives that the governor has put out there that have implications with infrastructure, you believe are good, but also many of them you believe are too compartmentalized and unable to be used? You would rather more flexibility in using the funds that the governor's putting out there?
Absolutely. I believe New York State has 62 different counties, and 62 of them, while we're all very similar, it's like a large family, or very dissimilar in many different ways. If the counties, the cities, the municipalities had a little more control over what they want to do, how they would go about doing it, it would certainly make our lives easier and better for our constituents.
So in other words, possibly diverting some of the funds that he has allocated and putting it back into the AIM program would be beneficial.
It would be beneficial, and it would be a better priority for the cities to work with what they could do with it. Okay. You know, since 2011 to date is 5 years. money doesn't go anywhere near as well, stretch as far as it used to.
Yes, yes, as cost rise, aim stays the same. We understand, we've heard that before. Let me just ask you one other question. If you were Governor Quill, and you wanted to raise specific monies, let's just say to increase the aim, what would be the best way that you would think about going about it? You don't have to answer, but do you have any idea?
It's scary just thinking about Governor Quill. Most people react the same way with Mayor Quill. So I don't know how we go about raising it, but I would want to make it more fair to all our communities, different sized communities, different needs, different requests. I think there should be a way to, I couldn't even venture to start there. I'm not prepared for that, but I do feel it has to be a fair system where everyone has an equal share providing for their residents.
Good. Harry, can you help me out? You have any
Sure.
questions?
I have a few questions. Let's stay on the topic of AIM funding.
Yes.
You said that the last increase was in 2011, it's been held flat for the last 5 years. What was the dollar amount that Auburn received?
I do not have, I can get that back to you.
Yeah, if you could, what I'm trying to get at with that is what we've done in other areas and if there's any offsets and how that plays with your overall budget. In line with that, do you share sales taxes with your county?
We do. The city of Auburn preempts from our local sales tax. Cuyahoga County is 8%. We receive all the tax, 2% of all the sales tax money raised within the city limits.
Okay. So it's just the money that's actually raised from sales within the city itself?
That is correct.
You get 2% of that?
That's correct.
Okay. And what's the breakdown of the revenues that come in from property taxes, revenues that come in from sales taxes, and the revenues that come in from any city fees that you have?
I could forward that on to you. I do not have that at hand.
If you could forward that on to me, I'd appreciate it. The increase of $15,000, that's all you would be able to get in addition with a 0.12% increase, right?
That's correct.
And you said that you're projecting a 2.5% annual growth in expenditures.
That's correct.
What, of that 2.5%, what is the highest cost driver in those expenditures?
Employees.
Okay. And in that's payroll as well as the pension?
That's correct.
Okay.
Pension, all the perks associated with employees.
Okay. Can you, this will be my last line of questioning. Back on the AIM, you said you would like it to be more fair.
Yeah, yes.
I can tell you as a legislator fighting for increase of AIM every year, I've been in the state now for 5 years. Every year we fought for an increase in AIM funding. There's always pushback because every time I ask for increased funding for the city of Rochester, then somebody else wants increased funding, and we talk about the disparity here in the city of Rochester compared to similar sized cities in the state. What's your idea of what would be more fair in the distribution of AIM funding? How could we resolve the fact that everybody comes to the well and then ultimately the executive has the luxury of saying, I can't meet all those demands, so he just throws his hands up and says, I'd rather spend money in other areas of economic development, and somehow it's going to trickle down and you're going to get the benefit of the economic development?
I guess at first blush, I would like to see some type of a competition, not necessarily a competition, but I would like to see a formula set up that a certain percentage is going to use for infrastructure, a certain percentage is going to use for homeless, something along those lines. But if there are guidelines from the state in regards to this, each municipality could apply using this formula, and it's a little more of an even playing field. I feel it would be very beneficial.
And using that formula where there's designation of what it's going to be used for, that doesn't concern you that you don't have the I mean, right now you have considerable flexibility with AIM funding.
Right.
So you want the state to be telling you how you're going to be spending those funds?
No, I do not want the state to be telling me how I'm spending those funds, but how the funds would be allotted to each community using a formula set up by the state, and then it would be the municipalities' goal to meet those standards, so, or to go into certain areas that they apply for.
So either on a, like a pro rata basis, on a population basis, and then if you're looking at infrastructure, certain localities own more infrastructures, and, the state picks up other parts of it.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mayor, I appreciate it.
Mayor, thank you very much. What it seems to me, and listening to what you've said and listening to even my colleagues in the Assembly, what we're going to try to do is talk with the governor as far as some of the allocations he makes in infrastructure, where he pigeonholes where they're going to go, and possibly see if we can get them swept, back into AIM and make it a little bit more flexible for that. But thank you very much for coming here today and taking your time and testifying before us, and hopefully we've done some good here today.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Have a safe trip. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Quill. Next on our list is another mayor, the Honorable Ann E. McCaffrey from the city of Lockport. Mayor McCaffrey, come on down.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Thanks for having me today. My name is Ann McCaffrey, and I'm the mayor of the city of Lockport. Lockport encompasses 8.4 square miles and serves about 21,000 residents. We're a little north of Buffalo and a little east of Niagara Falls. The city of Lockport was incorporated in 1865 at the time that the Civil War was ending. We were the first city in Niagara County, and we are the county seat. We're a city proud of our history and heritage, but with this history also comes an aging infrastructure. Today I'll provide you with a brief background on Lockport and what we determine our current and imminent infrastructure needs to be. Lockport was born of the Erie Canal. The digging of the canal brought Irish laborers to the area, many of whom stayed and raised their families here. Lockport is on the Niagara Escarpment, the same escarpment that created Niagara Falls. This steep climb in elevation is the reason for the locks at the Erie Canal in Lockport. After the canal was opened in 1825, further development and increased trade followed. Lockport not only thrived because of the trade on the canal, but because of the hydroelectric energy that was used to power the mills, bakeries, and other industries along the canal. Until 1880, Lockport was generating more power than Niagara Falls. Industry and businesses flourished. The city had a healthy economy for decades, and a prime factor in the city's economy was thriving industry, most notably our GM plant. In its prime in the 1970s, the GM plant had over 13,000 employees. Now there are about 1,600, a fraction of what it used to be. With the decline in employment at GM, population decreased, and with it housing values and commercial and industrial values as well. Other manufacturing companies, steel companies, and industries also downsized or closed their doors in Lockport. The city's population has declined, the assessed valuation has declined, and the number of residents living in poverty has increased. Many of our residents have a difficult time paying their taxes and their water, sewer, and refuse bills. In late 2013, the city of Lockport was classified as a city in moderate fiscal distress. Due to our serious fiscal problems, we were forced to lay off dozens of employees, obtain $4 million in deficit financing to pay off previous year's deficits. We raised taxes 10% in 2015, and we got out of the ambulance business. We also restructured our treasurer's office. This past year, we raised water rates by 15% for residential users and 22% for commercial. Now that our financial crisis has passed, we're focusing our efforts on providing essential services to our residents in a cost-effective manner. While we do have a balanced budget, we have almost no fund balance. Our water and sewer funds are very tight with little room for major shifts. If an unexpected or costly repair is needed, we will most likely have to fund that through the sale of municipal bonds. I would like to provide a brief overview of the status of infrastructure in the city and our current and future needs to ensure the viability of our city. Water. We have a pumping station on the Niagara River, and we pump raw water through a 13-mile water main to our water treatment plant. The line was installed in the early 1900s, and 11 of the 13 miles were replaced in the 1990s. However, 2 miles are the original pipe. It's over 100 years old. We know that this 2-mile section will need to be replaced or relined soon. We understand the cost will be in the millions of dollars. Once the water gets to Lockport, it's treated at our water treatment plant, which was built in 1929. Many of the pumps, valves, and equipment are the original from 1929. We know it's only a matter of time before we need to refurbish and upgrade this plant. The water treatment plant is a highly regulated process with chlorination. It requires 24-hour-per-day monitoring. As the water leaves the plant, it's distributed through 115 miles of water lines throughout our city. Much of these lines were put in the 1900s as well. We have a dedicated water distribution crew who are focused on the repair of water lines, water main breaks, and maintaining our fire hydrants. Leaking water lines are a problem. We estimate that we lose about 40% of our water produced through these leaking pipes. On to sewers and wastewater. We have 96 miles of sanitary sewers throughout the city. About 70% of these are combined sanitary and storm sewers. These combined sewers are problematic for us as the added stormwater increases the volume to the wastewater treatment plant. In extremely heavy rain events, as we had in June 2013, we had a significant flood. These combined sewers increase the chances of overflowing sewers into basements and overwhelming the wastewater treatment plant. These sewers lead to a city-owned and operated wastewater treatment plant where the solids are separated, the water is treated and returned to 18 Mile Creek, which leads to Lake Ontario. The solids are treated and delivered to our compost plant. On a side note, I would like to state that the city has recently submitted an application for the New York State pilot program for wastewater treatment management, the asset management program, which I think would be a great opportunity for a city like ours. On to streets. Many of the city streets began with dirt roads, then wood was added, and often a layer of concrete and brick. Most city streets in the past were brick. Over time, nearly all of our streets were blacktopped. Because many of the streets were first dirt roads, there's often inadequate structural base and poor drainage. Water freezes underneath, it causes potholes, water main breaks, and road deterioration. In addition, a number of our city streets have old trolley tracks and train tracks under them, which also contribute to the problem as they rust and heave. An example of a problem that we incurred last year was the closure of portions of Main Street due to a water main break. The portion of the water line repaired was from 1905. Once the break was repaired, it was connected to other sections of that line, which were just as old. Making those connections were extremely difficult. As more of the water line was exposed, more leaks and problems were found. When the water repairs were finally completed, we found we had a sewer repair that also required attention. The entire section of the street was fully repaved, but the work that was done, we had worked on cones and barrels on Main Street for almost 1 year. It was a massive project. I'd now like to state what we see as the city's biggest infrastructure needs, currently and in the imminent future. We need to separate our city's combined sanitary and storm sewers. We need to replace and upgrade water and sewer lines throughout the city. We need to refurbish our water treatment plant. We need to replace or reline the 2 miles of our original raw water line from the Niagara River. We need to do sewer line replacement. At our wastewater treatment plant, we need to expand the lab and update it due to the new regulations that have come out. We need to clean and regrade a portion of 18 Mile Creek to allow for proper flow of stormwater. We need to do complete road rehabilitation with proper sub-base and basin drainage instead of just the binder and top coat. We need to move water and sewer lines under sidewalks instead of under streets to reduce the digging up of streets. We need to add security upgrades at our water treatment plant. And I have a serious concern about future retirements of qualified personnel in our city. We have licensed water operators and wastewater treatment operators who will be retiring, and there's a dearth of newly licensed employees coming up through the ranks. We need to recruit more licensed operators and chiefs to take over as the current workforce ages out. And with all of these, I think it's beneficial if we have state grants to support them. I know for us it's a massive task, but any grant funding that comes through for any of these type of projects would be extremely beneficial to us. And lastly, I agree with Mayor Quill about the 2% tax cap as it fluctuates with the CPI. For us this year, it was 0.4%. We actually had a tax increase of 1.8%, which we were happy about, but we still had to exceed the tax cap, so it's difficult for us. That concludes my testimony, but I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today.
Mayor McCaffrey, thank you very much. You don't paint a very pleasant picture.
Sorry.
Yeah. You lose 40% of your water through leaks.
Yes.
Is there any estimate of what that costs you every year?
You know, the actual cost to us is not as high as it sounds with that, because the production of water for us, whether we're creating 4 million gallons a day or 8 million gallons a day, the actual cost is pretty much the same. It's the labor, it's the, keeping the plant operating. So once we're creating the water, we have the ability to create more volume. The cost is not that great, but our cost is really in the damage that's done with the water that leaks and the breaking pipes. And if we were to ever purchase water from either the county or a neighboring community, that would prohibit us from doing it because we'd be paying for that water at that point that we're losing.
Yeah. Do you have any estimate, if you were to solve this problem, okay, go underneath and dig and repair, what it might cost you?
To repair the 40% leakage, I mean, it would be millions of dollars, I'm sure. We replace the lines where they break, and when we have problems, we do that. But we don't have a system-wide approach throughout the city to do that. It's simply, we don't have the manpower or the money to do that.
You just react to...
That's correct.
Like the water main break on Main Street last year, that took a year. What did that cost you? And where did you get the money from to do the repairs?
It was over $100,000, I'm sure. And it took a long time. We had to go out to bid for the contract. First, we had to go out to bid for engineering, then out to bid for the contractor. We got that work done as they're making the connection to the 1905 pipe in each end. You know, that's deteriorating, so that connection, you know, nothing goes smoothly when you're working with a pipe from 1905. And then, as they're underground, they're seeing sewer problems as well. So it was a major problem for us.
I can imagine. And lastly, you mentioned all of these infrastructure needs that you find, and thank you for presenting them to us. Is there any guesstimate of what it's going to cost?